Alright guys, I decided to make a quick video on the things that I've done that have helped me get to where I am. And I think the main motivation for making this video is the fact that I know that there are some younger people who have either subscribed to my channel or that watch it who are young, like I said, and are just getting into powerlifting and may have some doubts about their potential or how far they can go, or things like that. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about where I started and where I am now, and kind of list and detail the things that I've done that have helped me get to where I am. I'm not the most talented raw 220 lifter by any stretch of the imagination, but I have reached elite in 2 weight classes, and I'm a decent 220 raw lifter, so I think that some of the things that I mentioned can be helpful, and hopefully you're doing some of these things already. Where I started, my very first powerlifting meet, I went to Mesquite, Nevada to do an AAU meet with my wife. We were the only ones that went. I didn't really have any training partners at the time. I just kind of did my own thing. As a matter of fact, leading up to that meet, my program was DC training. That's DC stands for dog crap. It's actually a training program developed by Dante Trudel. He's very famous in bodybuilding circles, but to be honest, that program is actually really good at getting you stronger. It may not be the most optimal powerlifting program, but it will make you stronger, that's for sure. But that's how I started, and at that meet, my squats, I ended up squatting 500, I benched 402, and I deadlifted 545. So I ended up with a 1447 total at 198 raw. I believe I weighed in around 193, I think. So I was pretty light. You know, I remember being at the meet and just watching everything and just listening to the people around me, just trying to absorb as much as I could. And I actually ended up meeting one of my training partners, who I don't really train with anymore. I still talk to him every now and again, but that's kind of who I trained with for a while. Just meeting him at the meet, getting to know him. He was from Vegas, very influential. Definitely attribute a lot of my success to him, in getting me started and just teaching me a whole lot. I really thank him a lot for everything that he did to help me get to where I am today, because he was a huge part of that. So things that I've done since then, that first meet, that have helped me get to where I am now. My best total at this point as a 220-pound lifter is 1,708 pounds, and that's without wraps. But one of the first things that I did was just listen. You might not agree with everything that people are telling you, but as a new lifter, somebody who's just getting into it, you don't really know anything. So your best bet is to keep your mouth shut and just listen. Now, it is really ultimately up to you as to whether or not you follow someone's advice. But because you're a beginner, because you don't know any better, your best bet is just to listen. And try to listen to as many people as you can that have more experience than you, because you're going to hear a lot of different things. But the thing is, because you're new, having a long list of things that you've heard gives you a long list of things to try, and eventually you're going to find something that fits you really well. The other thing is, sometimes you're going to have to do things that are uncomfortable. You're going to have to do things that feel weird at first, that are just going to feel uncomfortable. I can't think of a better word. That's going to be the way that you bench, the way that you squat, the way that you deadlift. You're going to have to do things that are totally different from anything you've ever done, and you're going to think that they're not going to work because they're going to be that uncomfortable, or you may have to take a few steps backwards with that thing that's uncomfortable before you take 3 steps forward, because that uncomfortable thing that you're doing is really what's best for you, even though at first you really don't think you can even do it. Another thing is don't fix anything that's not broke. There's all these training programs coming out, all these new things, and people are telling you to do this and telling you to do that. If you've had success with something in the past and you continue to be successful with it, there's no reason to switch from it. And I know that one thing that people will say is, just because what you're doing is working, it doesn't mean it's optimal. While I agree with that, and I've said it myself, if it's working, why would you change it? And there's kind of a fine line there. You have to decide how well what you're doing is working. You know, if you're making progress, great. If you're getting stronger, you're not injuring yourself, and you continue to do better on the platform where it actually counts, then keep doing what you're doing. But if what you're doing is really hard on you, you find yourself injured a lot, you find yourself making progress in the gym and hitting PRs in the gym, but when you get to the platform, you're not any better than you were the last time, then maybe you need to think about changing some things up. But then you do need to fix things that are broke. So, like I just said, if you're getting stronger in the gym, but your progress on the actual platform where it counts is stalled, then you need to switch things up. You have to do something different. You know, and that leads back to the things that are uncomfortable. For me, you know, I think I could have continued to get stronger as a 198-pound lifter. I had reached a weight of about 208, 210 the last time I did a 198 meet. Getting down to 198 wasn't that hard. Filling back out to that 208, 210 was what was difficult. And sure, I probably could have tweaked some things, done some things differently in the way that I cut and the way that I reloaded everything. But ultimately, I was fighting my body. I was I was suppressing myself, basically. My body wanted to be 215, and I wanted to stay 198 because I didn't want to put on some extra body fat. Well, I had to assess what was important to me. Looking a certain way or being as strong as I possibly could be. And I decided that, you know what, since I'm in powerlifting, ultimately my goal is to be as strong as I possibly can be. So I went to something that was a little bit uncomfortable for me, and that was going to the 220 class. I told myself from the beginning, you know, I'm going to be 198 for a long time. And I remember that first powerlifting coach I had, he said, yeah, you'll be 220 in a few years. And I shook my head and said, no, I'll be 198 for a while. And he was right. He was right. So, you know, do things that are uncomfortable. Fix things that are broken. And then I think one of the most important things is being consistent. You know, training has to be consistent. Your diet has to be consistent. And you put those two things together with consistency, and your success, your progress will be consistent. And you have to do all those other things that I mentioned consistently as well. That means listening consistently, doing things that may be uncomfortable from time to time. You know, I took advice sometimes. One time I took advice. I was working up. It was my heavy day. I was going to hit a 1 rep max PR, at least attempt a PR. I wanted to squat 600 that day. And I remember warming up, one of the guys that was in there was telling me, he was giving me some advice on what to do. And he said, well, what are you going to work up to before you hit 600? And I said, well, I'll probably work up to about 550, and then I'll put 600 on the bar and go for it. And he said, well, why go why not warm up to 500 and then make a 100-pound jump? And a lot of you probably hear that right now and think, well, that's really stupid. Why make a 100-pound jump? And here's the reason why I ended up following that advice, even though I had never made a jump that big, and it seemed really weird to me. It was uncomfortable. I was worried about it, but here's the reason why I did it. By the time I had done my 500 for a single as my last warm-up, I'm plenty warm. There's no more I need to do to get ready and prepare my body for 600. If I try 550 and it doesn't go as well as I want it to, then I put doubts in my mind that 600 is going to happen. Ultimately, I worked up to 500, took a few minutes, rested, went to 600, and I hit it. Albeit it was a little bit high. It was the very first time I had ever hit 600 squat. It's the very first time I had ever squatted it. So it was huge for me to take that risk, do something uncomfortable, and ultimately give myself a huge amount of confidence going forward in my training. Stay consistent with things that work. So that means if it's not broke, don't fix it. Stay consistent in the fact that you do change things that are broken, that aren't working anymore. In any profession, anything that you do, change is good. But you just have to figure out what needs to be changed and what's holding you back. And almost all the time there is something that is holding you back that you've got to tweak. You've just got to figure out what that is. And then, I think if you do those things, you will make progress. And honestly, I think you'll surprise yourself as to what you can do. I know when I started, I remember looking at records, and I just never saw myself anywhere close to those numbers. And I'm a lot further now than I ever thought I could be. So I hope those things help you. Feel free to ask me any questions below the video on the comment section. I'd be happy to do other videos regarding anything that you have questions about. Just let me know.